Welcome to my class, Judaism for the Spiritual Seeker. So, I notice there's a lot of not Torah spiritual coaches or spiritual seekers, people who are seeking a spiritual path, but I find that a lot of people who are Jews, don't look into Judaism and the Torah for this purpose. Like usually we go other places, like to the Eastern spiritual religions, to those kinds of practices. Normally we're drawn after that. And I want to try and explain why I think that is, and why Judaism is actually the ultimate spiritual path to enlightenment, because the Torah is actually a spiritual guidebook to enlightenment. Like the Torah basically tells you exactly what you do what to do if you're trying to become spiritually enlightened, or trying to have a spiritual experience, or trying to just know your creator, or trying to just make sense out of this crazy world and this crazy life. Like what is the point if all you're here to do is just live each day over and over until you die, and then eventually you die, and then no one can explain what happens after that? Like, what was it all for? But you know what, the Torah can tell you that, and then that by understanding and learning the Torah, then you start to understand each day of your life is very important. Why is it important? What are you supposed to do? Like, there's actually a purpose for you to be alive. And it's your task to find what that purpose is. Otherwise, what are you actually doing here? If you're living for experiences and for physical pleasures, then that's an ideology that you're following without maybe even realizing that you're following it. That's a foreign ideology to Judaism. Okay, let me explain something. The universe is a 5-dimensional hyperspace. It has 5 dimensions to it. There's the 3D and the physical. There's an element of time, which I find very interesting, and I'll go back to this in a minute. Time is very interesting in Judaism, and I haven't found this in any other spiritual philosophy where the element of time is incorporated into it. It's just a part of being a Jew, and it also seems to be a part of, it is a part of God, because God's name that he gave us in the Torah, it's comprised of I am, I was in Hebrew, Haya, I am, Hoveh in the present, and the future, I will be, Ihiyeh. So it's a composition of Haya. Sorry for this board, that's Hey. It looks like Gimel, but it's not, it's Hey. Yud, Hey. Haya was. Hoveh, I'm not very good at Hebrew spelling, Hoveh, and Ihiyeh. And it's a combination of that is God's name. So, and then the 5th dimension is the spiritual dimension. So you have 5 dimensions in the universe, and time is very important in Judaism. Now, I studied yoga for a long time, and time, you get up in the morning and you practice and stuff. You have your sun salutations, you have your moon, so whatever. You have certain things about the sun and the moon, but ultimately, that is just a kind of a misunderstanding of the spiritual forces, because they don't have the truth, because the truth is in the Torah, and the Torah was only given to the sons of Abraham through Isaac, Yaakov, and the 12 tribes. Okay, everyone else has something different, a different philosophy. So I want to show you first about where we come from, the Jews, and then why the Torah should be your spiritual guide, and you should get a rabbi, and you should ask lots of questions, and you should continue to grow. So even if you have a rabbi who at the beginning helped you a lot, and then you don't agree, or you don't see the same things, or it doesn't feel right, or whatever this case may be, you can always look for other rabbis. You should always look and always continue to grow, just like you would in any other spiritual path. You shouldn't just get stuck in one thing. Like, there's so much to learn. There's 4 different levels to the Torah, 4 levels. And we're meant to look at all of them. And the Torah has so many different pathways to understanding it. There were 600,000 Jews at Sinai. That number means something, but I'm not going to go into it now, but we'll just say 600,000. That's how many paths there are to understanding the Torah. So if you don't love Gemara, if you don't like the dogma, then look at the spiritual side first, and then once you understand the spiritual reasons that you do the acts, why you keep kosher, why you keep the holidays, why you keep Shabbat, why you do the bris, why you can't marry the other nations, or you shouldn't, and you understand all of that thing, and then it also helps you understand how to become spiritually full and better and holier, because we're commanded to be holy because Hashem is holy, God is holy. We don't say this name out loud. We read it, but we don't say this name, and so we say Hashem, which literally in Hebrew means the name. Hashem, we call our God. Let me explain. So Adam and Eve were created they were part physical and part spiritual. So when we think of what that means, it means there's the spiritual and the physical interact. In Judaism, we're taught that they interact. They can't really exist especially in our physical reality, which is a 5D hyperspace, like we said. I can go into more detail, but just for the sake of this, what I'm trying to say here, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if anyone's interested, I can. But so it's like a candle and a flame. So the candle is physical, the wick is physical, and the flame, when it's lit on the candle, then it gives out light, which is that's the spiritual light. Now, there's something that is interfering with, let's say if this is us in our world, because this is the lowest world, is the physical world. There's other spiritual worlds where I'm not really going to go into that right now either, but basically the light of God, the holy light of God, it comes down through like filters, let's just say spiritual filters, but between the physical world, our physical world, and the higher spiritual worlds, there's something called the klipa, which is like a peel. And it's kind of like this continuum. I'm not saying that the earth is evil or anything, or our world is inherently evil. It's just depends on humans, where we give our energy, because it's a two-way street, right? So it depends on what we do as the candle, to how much light we have in our world and how much is filtered out of it. So if it's more impure, then there's a thicker peel, a thicker klipa separating us from the light of God in our world. But it's also on a personal level. So it's us. I know in yoga they talk a lot about the ego and the self. Self. Okay? And basically they say that, okay, the ego is outwardly facing into the world, and the self is inwardly looking into the universe, into God, into whatever. They don't have necessarily like, okay, I mean, yoga philosophy is also a little bit of Hinduism and stuff, but I'm not going to go into it. I'm just saying that there's like this ego component, the personality, if you will, and the self, which is more like the soul, and like this is like who you are when you're doing, to do, and this is to be. Okay, but who is it to be? When you stop defining yourself in terms of what society and what everything is defining you as, like you're a teacher, a certain like, or a doctor, whatever your title is, you're a certain education level, you're a certain status, socioeconomically, or just everything it's not intrinsically anything to do with you. And even that, is like not that well explored, self-exploration. Just in general, a lot of people aren't even interested in any of this. So if you're already a seeker, then your one dedication should just be to the truth, wherever that leads you. And I feel like a lot of times we don't look into Judaism because we look at the other organized religions and we think that Judaism is just the same thing. And those don't seem to make sense. To me, at least they didn't, because ultimately, I mean, you get to a certain point where there's some questions that can't really be answered, and it's just like, oh, just believe. But Judaism never says believe. Judaism says learn. Hashem tells us learn the Torah, understand, and then you'll come to believe. Okay, so there's also a concept of, it's called belief, emunah, and security, which is bitachon. The more you learn, the more that you'll believe, and the more secure you'll feel in literally in everything in life, because the Torah is life. Okay, let me try to explain what happened. So Hashem made Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So they had a physical component, their body, and a spiritual component, where God, sorry, this is very messy. God blew spirit, a neshama, a soul, into Adam and Eve. And I can talk a lot about other things like this, because I do want to talk a little bit about the role of women and stuff. But I'll do a different class maybe for the whole thing about the sin here. What happened? There was a defect that happened when they sinned. And Eve caused Adam to sin. Okay, she sinned and she caused Adam to sin, and there was introduced death into the reality, and it was a high spiritual reality. And I guess they had bodies made of ol, with an aleph. Ol, that means light in Hebrew, and that means skin. So they flipped one letter. That's why also in the Torah it says you can't even change one letter. Why? Because you can change one letter and the complete meaning changes. Okay, so they changed the aleph from ol, which means light, to ayin, which means they just flipped one letter, which now means skin. That meant light, this means skin. And then also in the Hebrew language, every letter has a corresponding value. And that's explained also, like it has, like for everything spiritual, there is a physical, because it's just like this. Okay? So the letters, their letter, like aleph, would be like the spiritual potential energy of the letter, and the number, in this case aleph is 1, that's like the quantity, it's like a quality and a quantity. Okay, so that changed everything. It changed it to ol, which is 70. So it went from a 1 to 70, from a unity to a plurality. Okay, and we see 70 also in the 70 nations. Okay, and also we see it later on when Israel goes down into Egypt with 70 souls. And we can talk about stuff like that later, but I just want to show you. So Adam and Eve, there was a sin. It caused a change in the spiritual, in the reality, and their spiritual reality lowered. It got further away from God. Okay, and then there was Cain and Abel. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Then there was Seth, and there's also a blessing. God gave Adam a blessing, and it follows a certain line. Okay, and information on the truth. Adam also wrote a book later. I guess he wrote a book, whatever. Okay, then Seth, and then it went from Seth to Noah, and then here the whole world was destroyed in a flood. Okay, and it was destroyed also before that too. So, but during this time, there was one righteous man in the generation, and his name was Noah. And Noah and his son Ham, his other son Japhet, and his other son Shem all went in the ark, Noah's Ark. And they were the ones that repopulated the earth after the flood. And they came out in a different reality, okay, a lower still. We're going from a higher spiritual quality to a lower reality. So this klipa is bigger and less spiritual light gets through. And then we see Ham is wicked. He sinned in the ark, and he sinned after towards Noah. And Noah cursed his line, okay? Cursed. They're all cursed. And who came out of Ham? Among them, not all his, I'm not going to list everyone. I also didn't list everyone in this, all the generations in between them, just doing some notables, okay? So they're all cursed, and that's Canaan. Those are the people that lived in the land of Israel before the Torah was given, and Israel became a nation and went into the land of Israel. Mitzrayim, which is ancient Egypt. This is where the Jews, 70 souls, Jewish souls, went down into Mitzrayim, into ancient Egypt, and they got enslaved there. And then later we see that Joseph actually goes down to Mitzrayim, and he becomes the king of the world, and basically he's the viceroy to Egypt, but they're rule over all the civilized world. And then the Jews come out of there as a nation to God, to serve God only. So we'll see how it's separating the nation of Israel from the other nations, and then why the Torah is so essential if you're a spiritual seeker. So let's just see really quick, as quick as I can. So Noah has Canaan, Mitzrayim, and Cush. Cush, he was also at that time cursed, and that caused either him or part of his line or all of his lines to become black. And that's where black people come from, because he was cursed, and we see Cush is the Africans. Okay. Then he had another son named Japhet, and Japhet was like, okay, I guess. And from him, among other nations, because from all of these 3 sons of Noah, they repopulated the whole earth after the flood, and there came 70 nations from them. So we have Yavan, which is Greece, and from Greece we get all the philosophies, Socrates, Plato, we get the Olympics and all the whole concept of physical beauty and all that stuff. That's Yavan, sophistication, all that stuff. Same with Gomel, which we know was Germany. Now, all these nations have mixed over time, but at one point it was tribal, and those were the tribes. And then we see, and so Noah blessed Japhet with all the physical things of this world, and science, all that stuff, all the stuff pertaining to this world, because there is an afterlife, and the Torah explains that. So all that information, all the spiritual information of God went to Shem. So that's in Hebrew, Shem, and anti-Shemi, anti-Semite, because they were against Shem, because Shem wanted God in the world, because they understand the situation. What God is a creator, and so God doesn't destroy. So he had to create other energies to destroy. So for example, when people die, there's an energy that is in the God doesn't do that. God created an angel to do that, and then some of these people, if not all of them, just ended up worshiping that energy. Okay, and that's Satanism. Satan. Okay, so especially Ham's Freemasonry, Freemasons, stuff like that. And anyway, they're all Satanists, and like I said, they all mixed in and stuff with other people. So there's all this continuum of from evil to holy, and where all the energy goes, and where all these spiritual paths, where they lead to. But I know for a fact that Judaism leads to God, and the Torah is the truth. Okay, so what happened was all this information and the blessing went from Noah to Shem, and then happens in generations. Up here happened the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, or one world government under Nimrod. Okay, so think of that now, like the WEF. This is Tower of Babel age that we're basically in. We're in everything came back. The people of the flood, that's LGBTQT, whatever it is now. And Stom is here. This is the time of Abraham. But that's all, this is all what's happening. So then all the information went to Abraham. Abraham had Ishmael. From Ishmael was Islam. And he did not give them any spiritual information of the blessing. He gave it to Isaac. Isaac had Esav, which is basically Rome and the Vatican. And Esav, he would try to trick Isaac into believing that he served God, because they served God. Abraham had a special relationship with God. There's a covenant between Abraham and God. So Abraham has Ishmael with Hagar, and an Egyptian woman. And Ishmael was kind of evil. At the end, he came back and repented and lived with Abraham. But from this line is the Arabs come Islam and stuff. And then, but the blessing and the information goes to Isaac. Isaac has Esav, which is Rome, and that's the Vatican. And he pretended to serve God, but really he serves Satan. They're Satan worshippers. That's the Vatican. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I just want to get to the point, is that Isaac then had Yaakov, and Yaakov had the 12 tribes of Israel, and they were all saints. All of them got the blessing, all of them got the information. This chain has never been broken. From the 12 tribes, again, we have of the 12 brothers, there was Joseph, there was Levi, who especially took on the spiritual aspect of the blessing and learning basically Torah before it was given. And then from Levi's tribe comes Moses, and he gets the Torah. He brings it down for all of Israel, and all of Israel accepts the Torah. And in the Torah it says, to follow in the ways of your father and your mother. That's to do this, to separate ourselves from this, the 70 nations, from this ideology, to not go after their ideologies and not worship their gods, because they have different gods. Canaan, one of their gods is mentioned in the Clinton and the Podesta emails. That's Moloch. Who cares? And just know that these people, when they're talking about God, they're not talking about the same God as Judaism is talking about, Hashem. They're talking about their various energies that God created, that they started worshiping. That God created the sun, but they started worshiping the sun as an energy. God created the moon, they started worshiping the moon. The zodiac signs, and they are underneath the fate of. So they used to know how to manipulate those energies, and they started worshiping them as gods. So those are not the same God. When they're talking, when Judaism, when Jews are talking about God, and the Torah is talking about God, this is God, the creator of the universe. They're talking about other energies that they worship as God. And then you have another situation that's very interesting, is that Abraham, our forefather, he had, when Sarah died, so he only had Isaac with Sarah, and that's after he's circumcised. Before he was circumcised, he had Ishmael. And understand that the circumcision is a covenant between God and Abraham. When Adam was created, he was created without the foreskin. The foreskin's called orla. Remember, we said ol is light, and then it's also skin, orla. So he was created without an orla, without a foreskin, and he was spiritually perfect. And then Noah was without a foreskin. And then Abraham, God gave the covenant, and he said, all your sons through Isaac, well, actually, Ishmael's sons also do the Brit Milah to remove the foreskin. And that's like a sign that's the covenant between God. That's one of the signs. Also keeping Shabbat, also, separating yourselves, not going in these ways, not getting brainwashed basically by their ideology. But then Abraham, when Sarah died, Abraham married again Hagar. Hagar was sent away. Sarah sent her away, her and Ishmael. And later when Sarah died, she came back to Abraham, and she was now faithful to God, because before she wasn't. She was still serving some other gods. But now she repented. She came back. She became so spiritually pleasant. I guess they named her Keturah, like Ketoret, which is incense. So she had a pleasingly spiritual smell. So they had a bunch of sons after Sarah died, and they're the sons of Keturah. And Abraham sent them to the east, and he gave them certain spiritual information. And that information is the philosophies of the East, the spirituality of the East, of yoga, of Buddhism, of Taoism, etc. Whatever's in, Japan and all that stuff. He gave them certain information, and he gave them certain names of these natural forces. But he didn't give them the name of God, because God also revealed himself personally to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov as El Shaddai. He gave them one name here. They don't have the name. They manipulate the natural powers of the world and the evil powers. Okay, because there's evil powers that they're worshiping. So then all of the 12 sons of Yaakov were perfect saints, and among them also was Levi, who actually was the one that learned everything. And he had Moses, and there's that whole story about when the Jews went down to Mitzrayim, ancient Egypt, and got enslaved there, and then Moses took them out. So he took them. We were enslaved here not only physically but also mentally. We were mentally enslaved here, and Hashem and got Moses. Moses was a spiritually enlightened person, and he actually got a different name than God revealed himself to Moses, and gave us a different name in the Torah, which is that name, Hashem, that introduces to us the way the universe is made. And we're told to understand this story. We read the Torah, we understand this story year after year after year. Why do we do that? So we can understand who we are, and also know where we are in the history of our nation, because we're told that, again, we're going to be enslaved here. Because also, by the way, they're mind controllers, they're tricksters, they're experts at mind control. And so when we mix in with them, like we went into exile after the Second Temple, we mixed in with them. Just like here, the tribes of Israel, when they went down to Egypt, they got all mixed in, except for the tribe of Levi. They were not slaves in Egypt. They kept learning and kept themselves separate. They kept the circumcision, the Brit Milah, and they kept Shabbat, I guess. They kept all of that. But other Jews, the other tribes mixed in. And depending on the amount of mixing in there and the ideology, there was some that worshiped their gods and forgot all this and said it was important, or said it was just a story. There were people, and 4/5 of the Jews, that when Moses came and took the Jews out, 4/5 stayed. 4/5 stayed. Oops. Okay. Oh, no wonder if this has been out of focus. I apologize. I really don't know what I'm doing here. All right, well, anyway, 4/5 stayed in Egypt. So Levi learned Torah and didn't mix in, and they were never slaves. And then Moses came and took us out. So we're told again that that's going to happen. There's going to be a time toward the 7th millennium, and now we're in the year 5783. So we're towards the end of the 5th millennia, and there's going to be a time somewhere between that and the 7th millennia of our history of when we're counting our calendar by the moon, by the way, which is different than the other nations, then again, there's going to be a redeemer like Moses that will come and get us out of this nations and bring us into the land of Israel that was given to us as our inheritance. And that line is going to come from Judah, because that's where King David came from. He came from the line of Judah. Okay, I was going to talk about the daughters of Asher and Miriam and Sarah and stuff, but I'm not going to right now, and Eve, because that's also like, how do you know, like, you know, how do you know you're on the right path? And it's important to always make sure you're on the right path, just like if you're studying any other, like, okay, so the other spiritual philosophies, for example, so Abraham did give them the name, so they're not worshiping Satan. What they're doing, though, is they're somewhere in the klipa, and that's maybe where they should be. I mean, there is a difference between the Jewish soul, where the soul emanates from the source of the soul. It's slightly closer to God than, I'm not going to go into it, but there's a difference. And when we're taken out of Egypt, we're taken out from under the system of fate and the stars. So if you are learning Torah and you are acting like a Jew and you are serving God in this reality, in this world, then you're not under the direction of the 70 nations. The 70 nations have a spiritual elements. Like we said, there's a spiritual element and a physical element. So each nation has a spiritual energy that is like on top of them spiritually, which impacts their physical. I'm not going to go into it, but what happened was when God made the covenant with Abraham, he brought us out of this system, and there's no one in between us and God. We are serving God directly. And especially when the Jews are in the land of Israel learning the Torah and keeping the Torah. So if you are a spiritual seeker and you're Jewish, then you should definitely look into Judaism and into the Torah and as a spiritual path. It's your birthright also. It says that, like, it may seem difficult because it's in Hebrew, but there's so many books and so many lessons online and so many things in any language that you want. And God tells us in the Torah that it's so close to you. It couldn't be closer. It's in your heart. In your heart. Every Jew was at Sinai. And every Jew has the Torah in them already. And so it's just a matter of relearning it. So please check that out. There's so many people that have done the same thing. Like I said, I studied yoga for a long time. That's at the end of the yoga, there's just a klipa. And even some yogas are like really talking about liberating, the kundalini or whatever, which is the ego. They call it the serpent energy in your spine. And that should ring a bell. The serpent energy. It's not just like for no reason called that. It's the ego. So you can actually end up serving an energy force, an energy as a god, or you can end up serving your ego in this world also, and that's the inner Satan. That's the serpent energy. That's not good. You have the need to be able to lower your ego to, like, ultimately, like Moses was Eved Naaman. He was a faithful servant of God. He didn't have any ego at all. And that's one of the practices. And it's really about also just refining all of your character, your character traits, refining them to be holy, because Hashem told us, be holy because I'm holy. So follow always the truth wherever it leads you, even if it leads you somewhere uncomfortable that you didn't think you would want to go, like Judaism. But most Jews that I know that are not practicing, or that are reform, or that are conservative, or that are atheists, agnostic or whatever in yoga. A lot of Jews go to yoga and Buddhism. It's just because they didn't re-examine Judaism as a spiritual path as an adult. You learned what you learned in grade school or in whatever you did, and you never came back and learned it as an adult. And actually, it's worth it. So wherever, you are, the Torah is always very close to you. It's in your heart. And God said, no matter what you do, no matter where you go, you just make the effort to open a hole as small as a needle, and God will open it, make it as big as a gate of a huge gate. So you make the first step towards God, and He'll help you. You'll have siyata d'shmaya, help from the shamayim. And that we have so many rabbis, so many in our past, so many sages, so many prophets. That, there's a great book also. It's called Letters from a Buddhist Jew. I think it's Rabbi Tats. It's about a guy who was following Buddhism, and it's just their communication. That was an interesting book. But anyway, just know that there is one truth, and it was preserved. We have the names of everyone. It was passed down from Moses to Yeshua to the elders to the prophets, or the prophets to the men of the great assembly, and then from father to son, father to son, father to son. For most of us, that chain, that unbroken chain of information and spiritual information stopped only 2 or 3 generations ago. Okay? When the exile is very long. Like I said, we're getting close to the 7th millennium. And pretty much everyone at least did Shabbat, kept Shabbat until a few generations ago. So somehow they got seduced out here again. But just remember, like in Mitzrayim, a lot of the tribes got lost here and not everyone came out. But there will again be a redemption from the line of Judah. That's King David. There will be a Mashiach from King David. And we'll know that it's a Mashiach because Eliyahu Hanavi will announce him. It's not the second coming of anybody. It's not anyone who's already been here and died and that we know recently or anything like that. So when he comes, and hopefully it will be soon, we want to make sure that we're understanding reality properly and clinging to God. And if your interest is just becoming spiritually enlightened, that's what Moses did. And where everyone can be like Moses, no one will be like him. He is the highest prophet, and there will never be another one as high as him, who spoke to God like they spoke face to face. But you can try. And the Torah tells you how to get there.